Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Laura Barrón-López, White House correspondent for Politico and a CNN political analyst. We have a powerhouse panel up here. Pretty excited about this. We're going to discuss the evolution of cannabis, including changes to the growing industry, how marijuana went from counterculture to mainstream, the increasing involvement of women entrepreneurs in this industry, as well as the ongoing impact of the war on drugs. And so I'm joined today by artist SupaPeach, Weldon Angelos, who's a justice advocate and founder of the Weldon Project, Bella Thorne, actress, singer, model, director, New York Times bestselling author, and a cannabis entrepreneur. And last but not least, Kazan, co-founder, chairman, and CEO of Glass House Brands. You guys ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Ready.
Yep. Also, are we allowed to curse? Will we be okay? It's so hard not to curse for me. Like,
I think it's fine.
At it.
It's about cannabis, though.
I won't stop you. So, recreational marijuana is legal in 18 states, including DC. Medical marijuana is legal in 38 states. And federal prosecutions have gone down. Kyle, I want to start with you. You were a police officer. You worked on drug identification and eradication in 1994. That was also the same time that then Senator Joe Biden was passing the crime bill. And that was during the peak of the war on drugs. I mean, what has changed since then?
So that's a great question. A lot of us, you have to put in context, 1994 was after really tough 1980s where crime and shootings and everything went up and people were scared. So they wanted their elected representatives to be harder on crime. And unfortunately, what came with that were draconian bills. The 1994 crime bill, which Senator Biden was the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, was extra draconian. They have mandatory minimums. They make crack cocaine 10 times worse than powder cocaine. And I think the idea was we're going to make the streets safe. And I don't think there was a racist intent at the time of the law. Now, all these years later, the statistics are in. Who got jailed? Poor people, who happen to be majority of black and brown people. So what I've said over and over again is, again, if you don't fix it now that the results are in, then maybe there was some more intent than I'm kind of sweeping away.
Yeah, Weldon, you made a face when
Yeah, I think there was a racial intent because the kind of drugs that they increased mandatory minimums were crack cocaine, which were predominantly in the black community. And so you look at the way they treat, other drugs, specifically the opioid epidemic, they treat it like a health issue. But when it comes to drugs like crack cocaine, you can get 30, 40 years for a sugar packet worth of crack.
I mentioned a lot of things at the start of that question about what's changed. I mean, back then, who would have thought that 18 states would have legalized recreational marijuana? But this also brings me to, what hasn't changed. SupaPeach, the government still continues to pursue cannabis-related offenses. Mm-hmm. You have a very personal story here. It's impacted your family recently. Your brother, can you please tell us about that?
First, I wanted to thank Mr. Cal for, handling my brother's case, and shout out to Glass House and also Mr. Weldon. But, my brother, he got caught with 5 pounds or whatever, and then they want to take him to prison for 8 years for some marijuana when no one should be in prison for a plant. That's so dumb. Mm-hmm. And me and my brother is so close, close. And it's just I just don't understand. I just want everything to be equal. How can rich people get rich off the same thing that he's going to prison for? It don't make sense. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It just don't.
It's disgusting. It's also like, you have one of the biggest things right now, huge in stock market, huge evaluations, billions and billions of dollars, and you're still doing this. Like, it's just terrible. Like, how can you do that?
Yes, and it's like, he's like my main man. It's like, we go everywhere together. Like, my career getting bigger. He can't even go out of town with me because he waiting for 2 weeks to go in prison over a plant. And when he not a murderer, he not a child molester. Like, what is the problem?
Yeah, just so the audience is aware of, your brother's name is Jose Valero Jr.
Yes.
And he's facing more than 8 years, potentially.
More than 8 years.
Yeah, for a nonviolent cannabis offense. Kyle, Jose and 2 others in the car that were with him were found with 3 handguns and $15,000 in cash as a part of this. And so as a former cop, can you just talk about, when you read that in a case, can you explain how the presence of guns are potentially leveraged in a case like this?
Yeah. One, it sort of scares people like, oh, there were guns. I think you have to do a deeper dive. Weldon, also, they brought up guns. He was a legal gun owner. He had Second Amendment rights. I don't think Thomas Jefferson said, your rights shall not be infringed unless you have weed. That's absolutely ridiculous. But, when you are playing, a little bit outside the law, you can't call the police. And so it's pretty normal that people, they use their Second Amendment rights and they're armed. But I always look when I'm, for instance, the Parker Coleman case, they used the gun situation. It wasn't with him. It wasn't in the car he was in. It wasn't anywhere near him, but they found it around, like in a car that he wasn't around, and they charged him with that. Mm-hmm. And so typically there's enhancements and things like that. But I look at if someone is pointing a gun, if somebody is, robbing, it's a whole different situation because that becomes a violent crime. All of these, including this one, are nonviolent, and yes, they added that just for effect, enhancements, things like that.
And Weldon, can you speak at all to how cases like this, why they go federal? Because he is being prosecuted by federal
so just to provide some context, the statute he's being prosecuted under is 18 U.S.C. 924C. 924C used to be the most draconian statute in the federal system. I got 3 924Cs, which they gave me 5 years for the first one and 25 for each subsequent offense, even if it happened within an hour of each other. And so we passed the First Step Act in 2018 that brought the charges down to 5 years. Mm-hmm. So they can't be more than 5, but that's still a mandatory minimum. And the reason why these cases go federal is because the federal system has mandatory minimums. Most of the state laws, you got parole in the state, you can get out early. So they use that for leverage. In my situation, I sold $900 worth of cannabis. At the time, I was a successful music producer. I was working with Snoop Dogg and Tupac Shakur's recording group. And so they used those mandatory minimums to provide leverage to try to pressure me to tell on rappers. And when I said no, they charged me with 100 years of 924Cs.
We want to get back to what can potentially change, federally. But before we do, I do want to talk about how the industry and the economy of cannabis is changing. Bella, you launched Forbidden Flowers in 2019. The marijuana industry is still considered largely male-dominated, but more and more women are entering this business. A recent study actually found that female executive representation is down to 22% in 2021. That's down from 2019. So what made you decide to get into this industry, and how do you hope that it can change in terms of more women getting involved?
Well, for me, I had been to quite a few doctors. I had stomach issues. I was constantly just would wake up in the morning, throw up. It was hard for me to hold food down sometimes. I had crippling anxiety, just some days can't get out of bed type of anxiety, can't look at people. And, there were so many pills, pushed, and what about this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. And I have never been a fan of that healthcare system. And then I found marijuana, and that completely 100% changed my life. I was able to eat, I was able to hold down food. I still have anxiety, it still can get bad, but it's so much better than what it was. And at the time when I started at 21, it was very taboo. Weed has always been taboo, and that's just always been how it is. And there, especially at the time as well, you just don't see females in cannabis, and people kind of relate it to be more of a male drug, and I kind of don't understand that. And that's why with Forbidden, I purposely chose all these bright colors and these wash of, sparkles and different things to bring, a happiness around the plant, a lightness, a feminine energy to it. And and then I started Forbidden, and I really wanted to end the stigma, around marijuana, which is why I chose Forbidden Flowers, hence the name.
And Laura,
Yeah.
when you say, why aren't there more female-led brands, I think you have to give a tip of the cap to Bella. I mean, you think Cheech and Chong, you think Snoop Dogg, you think, I mean, you can just go, Harold and Kumar, everybody's, how many women come out and say, I smoke? Bella's very brave. I mean, when she did that, I was like, asking, going, is she ready for this? And the people are like, no. She's been doing this. This is who she is. She's very real, and that's why she's authentic. And so I really give a tip of the cap because, I mean, just try and Google women smoking marijuana. You're not going to see a lot. So some of that may be just the society.
But are you guys also finding that, I found that Gen Zers are partaking in cannabis recreational use increasingly
For sure.
year upon year. So are you trying to at all tailor, your cannabis companies to be more,
Gen Z.
inclusive, not just for Gen Z, but for younger clientele?
I don't tailor anything for Bella. Bella is Bella, and people follow her, and she has an authenticity. So if I had a daughter, I'd want her to be as brave as
It's
Bella.
Gen Z women in particular, I guess, that I'm asking.
100%.
Just to make it, since you talked about the fact that consumers tend to be male
Right.
In the past, you're trying to make a company that is more
I'm
inclusive
just like,
for women.
bro, why can't women smoke weed too, man? What's such a big issue about this? Like, so yes, but for me, I don't, the brand is the brand. I'm not really trying to, we got to get this group of people and this group of people and this group of people. And then maybe if we release this thing, then, this group of people will like it. And it's really not about that. It's like, how do we make a product that people love, that makes them feel better, that makes them genuinely happier? And that's, also why I chose Glass House, because I had seen a lot of cannabis and grow houses not done right. I've seen it a lot of times, and finally, when I found Glass House, I was just like, oh wow, here it is. We can do this together. These are my partners, and I just got really lucky.
And just notice the juxtaposition of the conversation in 20 minutes. We're talking about Bella building a real business. There's video of her and photos of her at the farm with a heck of a lot more than 5 pounds of cannabis. And we're talking, and later tonight, we're gonna talk about margins, we're gonna talk about what can we do to help Bella build that brand. Meanwhile, Supa, who pointed out rich folks are building businesses, yet her brother, less than 5 pounds, is facing potentially more than 8 years in prison. This is happening at the same time. In 20 minutes, we've gone from how's Bella building her brand and getting more people to use cannabis, while this family is real. I mean, you see the pain, and they're worried they're going to have to walk her brother into prison.
Yep.
And when you see the, sorry. Go.
Yeah, it's important to note too that under federal law, it doesn't recognize state law. Federal law supersedes state law. So they're not prosecuting Kyle. They're not prosecuting Curaleaf, Cresco, and they're selling millions of pounds a year, but they're using those federal resources to go after a small-time cannabis offender. And so we have this two-tiered system of justice that rewards you, if you're rich, and punishes you if you're poor, especially a person of color. And so, the federal government needs to, step up and end this war.
And our point is, lift Bella up. That's the right thing in society. People want that. It's a democracy. But in this, there should not be this pain, and you don't send a 24-year-old, no record, and you're gonna incarcerate him into like a prison? Or what are we doing?
Yeah, we're going to get to the justice reform very quickly. Before we do, I do want to let everyone know that we are going to take some Q&A with 20 minutes to go. So please get your questions ready and send them in through the app. But first, Kyle, still on the economy and how it's changing. In California, small marijuana growers are potentially facing extinction. When Prop 64 passed in 2016, it limited cultivation to 1 acre, as you know. to favor small farmers. And the state made a change, though, to accommodate larger corporations. What it did was it made it so they could buy up an unlimited amount of 1-acre licenses. What is this doing to the industry in California, and what do you think other states could learn from what's happening there?
So California is its own state. I mean, and it's the largest market for cannabis in the world. It's bigger than Canada. And Prop 64, which is something that I wanted because it would stop putting people in prison, would legalize a market. It was far from perfect, and they wanted to give a buffer for some smaller growers. We were one of those. We bought basically 1 acre. And then we saw how things were changing. We also saw that the illicit market is over, it's like 3 times bigger than the legal market. The only way to combat that, because we pay high taxes, we have our product tested, was to take advantage of the situation to scale, so that we were able to hopefully give people product at a more reasonable price to compete with the illicit market. And I would just say things have changed. Remember, there were thousands of stores in the past under Prop 64. Now we have like 1,000 stores. So, and 65% of the state is still not legal. So I think a lot of the intent of Prop 64, it's moved around quite a bit.
Do you think that the only thing that would fix that, would fix the fact that there still are a lot of illicit growers, is federal legalization?
That's probably a deeper question. I think federal legalization would certainly help. I think the small growers, you don't want to be growing in Massachusetts because 10% of the electrical grid goes to growing cannabis. Who wants that? That's not a good carbon footprint. So if you let people in ag states like California grow and ship, so anybody here in Texas decided, I want to get on Amazon and order something from a small grower in Mendocino, I think that certainly changes things, and it's better for the planet, it's better for the consumer, and I think ultimately that's where we end up going.
SupaPeach, I want to bring it back as we start to get into the potential changes that could happen, federally, the reform that advocates like Weldon are pushing for. What has the impact been so far on your family with your brother facing this right now?
He is torn apart because he's the only boy from the girls. We have 4 sisters, and he's the only boy. So he's like my father. I got a father, but he's like my father. So him taken away from us is like he's missing. He's the king of the house. So my mom said we got to get prepared for him to go to prison. 8+ years they're trying to give him in 2 weeks. So I'm not eating. My anxiety bad. I just got to get prepared.
I mean, what do you hope that the audience, learns from this conversation today, and particularly the impact that it's had so far on your family?
I just want things to change. It's nothing. I mean, they can't help me, so somebody gotta help. What I'm gonna tell them?
I'll help with that. They could write their congressman, they call their congressperson, and they can say, this is happening on your watch. You're elected from my area. This is unacceptable. Do something. Even if you don't legalize it, end this. Just end this. Stop enforcement. It's nonsense.
And that goes to my next question, which is that, as you guys know, when President Biden was running for the presidency, he did say that no one should be put in prison for a nonviolent cannabis offense, for cannabis possession. He does not support marijuana legalization, despite the fact that some 80% of Democratic voters do. But he has said no one should be in jail, and he has said that he potentially supports descheduling of the drug from the strictest classification, which is Schedule 1, down to Schedule 2, which would make it easier to also conduct research into marijuana's medicinal uses. Weldon, do you think that the Biden administration is being responsive to advocates who are trying to push them to take these steps, which could be potentially done through executive action?
Not enough. But I will note also, so Biden has also said he supports states legalizing recreationally. He supports that. He supports medical marijuana. But he you know, he's partly responsible for the mess we're in, especially with her brother. And so, you know, the promises he made brought a lot of hope to people that I represent who I left behind. I spent 13 years in prison for $900 worth of cannabis, but there's plenty more people just like me in there. They don't have celebrity friends or political contacts. And so we're trying to be the voice for them. And, you know, we're gonna hold Joe Biden to his promises. And we're going to make sure that he does what he said he was going to do.
In addition,
Laura, he didn't say take it down. And since then he has, but candidate Biden said deschedule, decriminalize. He said that. Now understand, and you know from living in DC, there's 4 lobbyists for every member of Congress for the pharmaceutical, including Mr. Biden has a track record, and same with Mr. Schumer, of taking money from pharmaceuticals. Descheduling to not descheduling, taking it down to Schedule 2 is a gift to the big pharma. That's what that is.
but I want to also ask about the Clemency program potentially, right? Which is that there is talk of the Biden administration continuing on what prior administrations had done to grant clemency to those who are currently incarcerated for nonviolent marijuana offenses. Where are those conversations at, and are you hopeful that those programs could start at all this year, you know, the clemency?
Yeah, we're certainly hopeful. And, you know, we started having conversations with the White House last February, with the White House counsel mainly. And since then it's advanced, but I think there's this fear that if they do something before the midterms, that it's gonna cause them to lose some seats. So they're very fearful that if he grants clemency to the wrong person and they get out and commit a crime, that it's gonna impact the midterms. I'm hopeful we'll see some action before then, but not a whole lot until after the midterms.
And for what it's worth, Weldon is in communication with the White House, and they are watching. They're not sure how to play it, even though it's on record what Mr. Biden said as a candidate. He was unequivocal about releasing prisoners and stop locking people up. There's no debate about that. And so we're not sure which way it's going, but Weldon and Mission Green are in contact. And I will say, having 2 very powerful women with very large platforms coming up here and being thought leaders about this is huge, because that puts pressure.
Kyle, you continually segue into my next question, so which is that, Bella, what role do you feel as though cannabis entrepreneurs like yourself have in bringing awareness to these injustices that we're talking about up here?
Like being here today. Yeah, I think that everyone that knows what marijuana is, which is everyone knows what it is. I think everyone should know this. And every day you go to bed, you should know her story. You should know this. And like, literally stop pussyfooting around over here and actually fucking do something. Jesus, like, how many people have to go through so much pain in order for things to actually change? Like, when does that stop? How many tears does she need to cry for people to understand how wrong this is and how unfair? It's just like, it's just so fucking upsetting. And so what we have to do is we have to keep talking about it, and we have to keep fighting, and we're always gonna do it. We're always gonna do it. And I just really hope that someone does something now. This is happening for her in, what you said, 2 weeks? Like, someone do something now.
And Weldon, you have a outstanding letter to the White House, correct? That basically says, grant these clemencies now, make sure that these, I believe it's 2,700 that are incarcerated right now are released.
Yeah, there's roughly 2,700 people just in federal prison. There's thousands more across the states, but Joe Biden can literally, with the stroke of his pen, he can free all 2,700. Just recently, our friend Rollo just got sentenced to 8.5 years, just like her brother's facing, for a nonviolent cannabis charge. Thankfully, we were able to, in September, to rally people like Drake and Killer Mike and Deion Sanders to join us in our call to get President Biden to take action. And so we appreciate people like Bella and Supa stepping up and using their platforms as well. We need everyone to step up.
I'd like to start taking audience questions soon, so I'm going to just cue that hopefully we can get them set up on the screen in a matter of minutes. But first, I also want to talk about the alliances that have clearly been forged on this panel. Kyle and Weldon, you guys both have very different paths to social justice and advocacy. Kyle is a former cop, Weldon is a former music producer. And how did you two come to work together? And was there any skepticism at first when you entered into this alliance?
Yeah, I was introduced to Kyle by a mutual friend, Sherry, who's a very powerful cannabis activist. And so, yeah, I was skeptical at first speaking to him. You know, he kind of had that, you know, cop feel. But he since then, he's been amazing. He's one of the few cannabis, you know, CEOs and companies actually put their money where their mouth is. They've stepped up, they've put money in, they've donated to my organization. Anytime we've called on them to help us, they've stepped up and showed up. So we really appreciate it.
Who needs to step up now is fucking Biden, who literally said this. He's the one that needs to step up now. He needs to change this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you know, I come at this from a different perspective than Weldon. We just, you know, came to the same exact place. And I'm just very careful about who the company and who I personally will attach, you know, to and spend our time. And there's other folks out there that they're highlighting this, but not as genuine as Weldon. So I did a deep dive, and Sherry is somebody that I believe in. She's kind of one of those saints that walks amongst us. She doesn't make a lot of money, yet her whole purpose is to try and get people out of prison. And so when I met her on a panel, I immediately forged a relationship, and she kept telling me about Weldon. And so, yeah, I did some research, deep dive, and we slowly got to know each other. And then it didn't take very long where I'm like, okay, number one, I like him. And then I saw how he suffered. He served 13 years. He's sitting here not angry. I know inside he really is, but he comes across, he didn't come out and explode. He came out and said, I'm going to try and fix this because I know what it's like. And to hear him talk about choosing between having money for a phone call and a toothbrush, because I didn't know you didn't get a free toothbrush in prison. I mean, he's so poignant. He's wonderful. And I'm honored, number one, to have him as my friend, but also to do everything I can to support him. And so people say, well, what about the other? I mean, Supa was asking me last night, what about the other CEOs out there? What about them? I don't care if their motivation, I don't care if they're late to the party, just join the party. Help Weldon make this go away. Just what Bella said. Do something. Do something.
Seriously.
As you guys have both started to talk to SupaPeach about her brother's case, have you also been having conversations with other CEOs or other people that are involved in criminal justice reform advocacy about his case?
So I would say we talk more about several people's cases. His is now amazingly egregious. I mean, amazingly. And he's not yet in prison. So we're like, let's try and stop that from happening. I know a lot of the cannabis CEOs out there, and I'm encouraging them to join in. And so I use my, hey, come on, this is the right thing to do. How do you look yourself in the mirror where we're making money and we're being asked to, Thursday I reported financial results for a publicly traded company. And I was there with a CFO, and it was like, we're doing business. Meanwhile,
this is happening.
Parker Coleman is on lockdown for weeks, and he's just trying to survive the next day.
Yep.
It's just insane.
More and more CEOs are starting to step up as well. So we reached out to a number of them. A lot of them didn't respond, but slowly, like Verano and a few other companies are starting to step up. But we need them all to step up because we can't do it alone.
Do you, I do want to talk about, Bella, you mentioned at the start the medicinal usage for marijuana. Do you think that those that kind of usage is still misunderstood, that misperceptions, persist about marijuana?
Oh yeah, I think in general people still think it's the devil's lettuce. There's a lot of misconceptions around weed as well. Like, one of the most common that I get is like, and you can still work, like you still can tie your shoes, you can do this, you can get off the couch and you smoke weed, are you sure? It's like weed has been used to like, you know, brand someone as like lazy or not good enough or low class or blah, 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 blah. And so, you know, really trying to change that around it and people be more conscious and noticeable of the actual benefits. I think, you know, I've always had kind of a fucked relationship with the healthcare system. I just don't like it. I don't believe in it. And I think that it's so ridiculous that we're just pushing and pushing pills, putting so much money into this instead of putting it into weed. When you know this changes, you know it can change someone's life, but yet here we are still making pills. I just think it's absolutely ridiculous, and hopefully that's the future of weed. The future of weed is people actually understanding the benefits of it and finally seeing that, and the stigma of everything else that I said actually slowly going away. Yeah.
In terms of fighting the stigmatization of marijuana, Weldon, do you think you were a part of the music industry and unfortunately your career was cut dramatically short? Do you think though that the hip hop industry, that hip hop artists have a role to play in terms of bringing marijuana out from counterculture into the mainstream, fighting the stigmatization? We know that, you know, way back in the mid to late 90s, you know, Cypress Hill, there was a lot of, marijuana at first wasn't mentioned that much in music, and then it started to be mentioned more and more in hip hop.
Did you not see the Super Bowl halftime show?
Proves my point, right?
So, I mean, I would say hip hop played a very large role in making cannabis use acceptable and removing the stigma. And so cannabis or hip hop still has a role to play, but I think they did a lot already, especially the hip hop culture in California. When the medical marijuana initiative passed in 1996, you know, it was legal. Like, you know, we started, you know, not being afraid to you know, take it on tour and you know, smoke weed, making videos right in the streets. And so it really, you know, California hip hop scene really had a lot to do with that.
Do we have any audience questions at this time? I'm not sure if I have to.
By the way, when you were asking Bella, I couldn't help but think some of this is generational.
Yeah.
You know, my generation, we had the president's wife, Nancy Reagan, saying, just say no, and then they would have like an egg on a skillet saying, this is your brain on drugs and all that kind of stuff. So even my friends that are older, that are in pain, you know, that can't sleep and they're taking Ambien and they're taking opioids, they're hitting me up going, hey, I'm reading, thanks to people like Bella and, you know, those people's kids that are following Bella, they don't have that same stigma. They see cannabis as a completely different situation. Mm-hmm. And so part of it is just a generational thing. As time goes on, more and more people, I think, are going to be really wide open.
How much of, you mentioned the generational thing, but is there also a growing clientele among older generations for?
100%, and then also people that you think really understand. I'll throw the team name out. We met with the Golden State Warriors when they came in to play the Lakers, and we met with a number of their players. And what's their biggest thing besides just nagging pain, because they're playing every night and they can't heal? It's sleep, because they're flying around the country. So I started talking about CBN, and if I said how many people here know CBN, probably less than half. There's CBD, there's THC, but CBN actually helps you go to sleep, and it's from the plant, so it's natural. And so I was like, here's some CBN gummies, and a bunch of them have said, I need more. How do I get more of this? Because it really works. So I think that people are very interested, and once they try it and realize, wow, I can function. If I have anxiety, like Supa has some anxiety. I was like, if I gave her some of our oil, she'd feel a lot better and would be able to function, to Bella's point.
Mm-hmm. How do you, as a cannabis entrepreneur yourself, Bella, as well as Kyle, I mean, if the federal government were to legalize, how do you foresee that changing the industry and your companies?
You know, I think that it pushes forward the growth of the industry, and there's a few things that happen statistically, whenever a state legalizes even medicinal. 1, opioid deaths go down. Every single state. 2, alcohol sales go down. And from my former employment as in law enforcement, I never got punched in the face by somebody who was high.
I was about to say, like, it's
Right?
just, come on.
Right, that people don't usually get angrier with
And you're also not overdosing on weed when you can on pills. Like, come on.
And I pulled dead people out of cars from horrific accidents, never from weed. I've pulled people over going 20 miles an hour in a 50 on cannabis because they're moving slower, but the ones that are going 100 in a 30 mile an hour zone are usually hopped up on alcohol. So I think it's just for society, for deaths, and as Bella said, opioids. There's nothing more tragic than seeing somebody die of a heroin overdose because they can't get the right dosage since they're buying it illegally too. So yeah, cannabis, I think it makes the better world place.
All the people getting addicted from being very young, playing sports, breaking your leg, getting prescribed this, boom, now you're straight up addicted. And I think one of the worst things about this happening right now is that when people look at drugs, they go, oh, look at those bad people, those gross people doing those drugs. No, this was a teenager who played football, okay, and he hurt himself, and then doctors gave him this, and he literally got addicted. It wasn't him getting, just addicted, oh, stop taking them. No, his body's actually feeding for this. How do we understand this better and actually be like, oh, okay, this is not these people's problems. It's fucking our big pharma company's problems. It's literally Biden's problem. It's just the way that we look at it as well needs to change. And hopefully when that does, then people will actually start to use cannabis instead of these pills.
To Bella's point, when I was an athlete at USC, there was a linebacker, really nice, soft-spoken young man from San Diego. And later he ended up being an all-pro NFL player named Junior Seau. And cannabis, even today, is not yet pushed, even though now players are using it all the time because of the head trauma they take. What happened to Junior? Just after his career, he took a gun, put it to his chest, and killed himself so that they could go study his brain because he was hearing things. I have to think that cannabis might have stopped that kind of brain trauma. So to her point, it was utterly tragic that a gentleman would shoot himself in the chest and just wait for him to bleed out so that the world could see he wasn't crazy, it was his brain.
And descheduling would potentially help study those
100%.
medicinal uses, which is
Legalizing
something
it
that is
ends
not studied by the government at all.
But it won't end
right?
everything
Yeah.
because, when the federal government deschedules, there's still states have to legalize. That doesn't force the states to legalize. So we'll still have states like Idaho and South Dakota that are trying to keep prohibition.
So that actually goes well with a question from the audience, which is, how can the general public better work to normalize and destigmatize weed in predominantly red states? Weldon, or you want
That's a Kyle question. The red states.
What I would tell you are
Republicans.
people with platforms like Bella, like Supa, they have following in red states. They have following everywhere. So being, and Supa's young, Bella's a little bit older and has been showing. So I think that is the best way, is just to keep showing that you can function. You can be a very successful best-selling author. You can be an actress. I mean, she's at the peak of success. Maybe not the peak yet. But she's hugely successful, and she is a regular cannabis user. That is, even the red states, it's a democracy. If people stop voting folks that are anti-cannabis, it ends the nonsense.
SupaPeach, you're based primarily in Atlanta, Georgia, correct? As you've been starting to make people aware, your followers aware of what's happening to your brother, what are you hearing from your followers?
They they heartbroken because they follow me, so they in love with me and my story. So they heartbroken. They trying to if you need anything for your books, let me know. Trying to send him money. They just everything need to stop. They just very sad because I'm sad. Because my followers are like my family. They follow me for a reason.
Do you think that talking about it is raising awareness among people who may not otherwise realize that this continues to happen, that people continue to be incarcerated for nonviolent cannabis?
Of course, because when I post it, they be like, what can we do about it? Like, I made a post, a big old post, and I tagged Joe Biden, all of that, like a real big paragraph, and everybody was tagging him, but he not doing nothing about it. So now I have him to back me, and he need to do something.
It sounds like all of you have a message for President Biden.
Fix it.
We're getting a few questions specifically about certain strains, I believe, of cannabis. One person says that they've heard negative things about Delta 8. Can you speak about that? Whoever wants to jump in, Kyle or Bella, or someone.
So it's a little bit of a nuance. Delta 9 is the THC that everybody knows about, and that's what the government sort of restricts, but there is no restriction on Delta 8. Mm-hmm. So it's more of a loophole-y thing, and I think the federal government, until they just get out of the business of being stupid, will probably make that illegal. I don't know, as far as feeling, I always smoke Delta 9. The stuff that Bella and it's really good California grown Delta 9. So I don't need to screw around with Delta 8 and figure that one out. And we don't sell outside of California, so I didn't want to play the loophole. It came to us as a business decision saying, hey, you could sell, you could work with Bella, and we could sell Delta 8, right now. And I'm like, yeah, I don't
outside of California?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just, so, I don't know what Kayla's heard about negative things about it. Except I'm sure the states that are dealing with it are not. You're probably still going to get arrested and have guns pointed at you because you won't know the difference between Delta 8 and Delta 9 until the laboratory 3 weeks later goes into it.
Right.
What form of cannabis, is another audience question, do you guys think is the most effective for medicinal uses?
CBD.
Yeah.
CBN. And so we have some strains that, one of the things I like to do is take some forbidden flowers. Bella has a really good taste, so I like, and her jars are really pretty and everything else, so my wife likes to take her jars and put little plants in them.
Yeah, people love to put the plants in them.
I think that was your idea, and I think it was genius. But we have a high CBD, and I usually mix them. And so I like the feeling of the CBD on my body because, I still have some pain from being an athlete years and years ago. So I like that. And also for sleep, I like CBN. It helps. And I don't want to take Ambien. I'm sure, Laura, you've traveled, in all different kinds of aircraft around the world. I would say that you probably have tried Ambien, and that's not a good feeling. CBN, you wake up like just normal, and it's not addictive. So there's more coming.
I've never tried Ambien, but maybe I'll take up this other option that you're saying. Bella, what about you, though? I mean, what specific, I think the question, it went away now, but what specific cannabis do you think is fit for medicinal uses?
Well, I love the CBD ointments, like all the different types of rubs and oils and that kind of stuff. As far as I was a dancer and I have a lot of knee pain still. And some days it's just, tighter around the joints, and that's just great. They even have like bath bombs, CBD bath bombs that you could just like put in your bath and get all comfortable and feel better with your body. But usually actually, like for me in general, I'm just straight flower smoker. Like I pretty much just only smoke flower. But also oils and stuff and pens. I don't smoke pens, but I know that a lot of my friends do, and that it really does help them mentally and physically.
One thing we're not talking about also is it also helps sex.
Yeah, we have our turn on strain.
We've heard. I've had a lot of people tell me, kind of whisper in my ear that, hey, things really picked up after a 30-year marriage.
This panel definitely
we introduced
took a turn.
This.
Right?
It definitely took a turn.
And I think a lot of people also don't know that they're like, oh, well, if I smoke flower, I'll get this. It's like, no, all these flowers are so different, and flower, when it's grown as well, is grown to, let's say, like our turn on one is to actually, get things going there. Or, you obviously have indica sleep. There's different types of sativas, and some people get extremely anxious on sativa. I was a big sativa user, and I just had to slowly stop and only smoke indica because my anxiety was coming back all of a sudden, and I didn't know why. And that's because as well as I was smoking the wrong strain of sativa. I was smoking something that's making you like this, you're up, and that was too up for me.
What do you guys think is the next big thing in cannabis? And I want to extend this audience question out a bit. It doesn't just have to be about the industry or the economy of it, but go ahead.
I know one big thing is we're developing a brand called Reform with 2 E's. We put reefer and reform together. And this brand is going to be nationwide. It's going to give market share to victims of the war on cannabis like myself, like Jose, where they can actually get in the industry and be a part of it and get market share because, stories like mine and these help move the needle in favor of reform, but we're left out of the industry because we've been to prison, we got felony convictions, except I've been pardoned, but most people haven't. And so it's hard to get in the industry. And so Glasshouse and Kyle is giving us the ability to bring this brand out and not only support people who have been impacted and people of color across the country, but also fund individuals who are still incarcerated by putting money on their commissary accounts.
We've talked about this before, Weldon. Can you explain to the audience the difference between when you're granted clemency or when you have a pardon and how a felony conviction can still be left on your record and how that prevents people from being able to start businesses, from being able to get jobs?
Okay, so clemency is a general term that means executive mercy. And so there's 2 forms of clemency. There's a commutation, which is what we're seeking for Jose, where his sentence will be reduced to time served. You go home, but you still have a felony conviction on your record. And so the next thing is a pardon. A pardon basically restores your rights, but it doesn't remove the felony off your record. So people can still see that you were a convicted felon. I was, released under President Obama's administration and given a full pardon by Trump. But technically I'm still a felon, but I can own a gun, I can vote, I can do everything else, I can get a loan. So if we get Jose clemency and he gets a commutation, he's still gonna be a felon. Unless Joe Biden does what he said he was gonna do, he can't expunge a record like he promised, but he can pardon someone, which is the next best thing. But Congress really needs to step up and expunge these records, because who wants to have a cannabis felony on their conviction when they're in their 70s? I met someone that was 78 and he had a cannabis conviction, still a felon, couldn't vote, couldn't go get a gun, couldn't do anything. And so it's very important that Congress steps up and changes this permanently.
Because it would have to be legislation passed through Congress, signed by the president.
Even if Joe Biden did an executive order or did something to change it, the next president can always change it. So it's important that Congress steps up and just deschedules cannabis completely.
And when people talk about social equity, and a lot of states and cities are really going to that, and what that means is you try and grant a business license, like in Los Angeles, to somebody who's been affected by the war on drugs. And so to your question, you wonder why folks get into this endless cycle of just, okay, now I'm just selling drugs. So you come out with a felony conviction, and now you go back because you don't have any money, so you go back to the inner city. You can't get a job because you have a felony. You can't get a good job, so you're stuck. You can't get an apartment in your name because you're a felony. You can't vote. So you're just a marginalized American. You don't even feel like an American.
Second-class citizen.
100%.
With that scarlet letter on your back forever.
And so how do you lift somebody up? How does that person turn their life and go after the American dream?
Yeah.
They're gone. They're done. It was already hard enough if you come from the inner city.
And those charged with those offenses they tend to be, right, that more Black and brown people. Weldon, can you talk about the impact on, communities of color, particularly, from the war on drugs and those charged with the cannabis offense?
Absolutely. So the ACLU did a study and they found that Black people were 6 times more likely to be charged with the marijuana offense than white people, despite equal usage rates. And Black people are 10 times more likely to receive a longer prison sentence. And so you can look at it now, it's still to this day, the federal government's not charging many cannabis offenses. But look at Jose, he's being charged. And so if you look at the people that are still being charged, they happen to be people of color.
The war on drugs is a war on people.
It is.
Poor people. And who are mostly our poor people in this country? I mean, are there some whites in there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Poor white
but he
people
was
as
poor.
well.
So this, look, I know my congressman for both work and for home. I could pick up right now and get them on the phone. And by the way, I'm going to be talking to them about Jose going, can you please do something? And I'm confident that if you're from Palos Verdes, which is an affluent area of Southern California where I live, you're not dealing with what Jose is dealing with. Like, we'd work it out. We'd figure this out. And we have two sets of justice. People felt really good about OJ. OJ was rich. OJ paid for a huge, so I know that's a whole different thing about that, but the war on drugs, including cannabis, is a war on poor people. That's what
Absolutely.
this is. And that's where I became an advocate against, after being part of it, going, this is just terrible. This is not justice is blind. It's not what we live in today.
What changed your mind since you were a part of it and a part of the...
So I was a zealous, first off, I was never zealous about cannabis because I smoked it in high school. And in California, you grow up, everybody's smoking cannabis a bit, including parents at the time. But I made a lot of drug arrests, mainly methamphetamine and heroin. And after a while, I'm a pretty affable person. I got to know the folks, and they started paging me, because it was a few years ago. And I would talk to them, and I'm realizing, and it hit me one time, there's a gentleman by the name of Mark, got kicked out of grandma's house, was homeless, and he paged me, and I went over to where he was living in a dumpster, and he said, I'm ready for treatment. And it really hit me at that point where I'm standing there going, I got my badge, I got my gun, I got jail. I don't have treatment, it would be so much better. Because I was also building a business, so I had a business head. And I'm like, where are our priorities? Do we want to help this person, or we just want to go punish him? And I knew he was, by this point, I knew he was holding, so he's committing a felony. And I just became disenchanted, and that's when I started, my arrest went way down, and I just said, this is ridiculous. And several years after I left the department, I was given the opportunity to speak out about it and try and educate, because they always try and scare you. These people are going to come get you, the druggies, as Bella so aptly put it. She's right. And so I still have a coppish look, as Weldon said. And so at least when I'm on CNN or I'm on Fox, I can sit across and go, they're lying to you. If someone hits you on the head with a club or points a gun at you and takes your money, send them to jail. They break into your car, send them to jail. But if they have something in their pocket and it's a free country, let's not save them from them. It's just stupid.
We only have a little bit of time left, so I want to have a question. I have a question for all of you. What is the one thing you'd like the audience to walk away with from this conversation that you all have just had, whether it's about the future of the industry or criminal justice reform?
I hope people harass Joe Biden. Just let's harass him. How much do we got to do to harass this guy? Let's fucking do it.
I don't really know nothing about the cannabis, but I just want everything to change, everything to be equal. So if y'all have anybody that's in prison, they'll be free. And please tag Joe Biden, tell him, I don't care what y'all do, just make it, fix it. That's all I want.
I hope everyone leaves energized to want to do something about this. And like Bella and Supa said, tag Joe Biden, tell him to fix this. Or like Kyle said, fucking fix this.
Go on Twitter and act up.
I would take people back to recent history and the uprisings after George Floyd. That moved the needle. When people get angry, politicians get scared. If we get angry enough and we are tagging Joe Biden and we are calling out to our Congress people, they tally when you call. They tally when you email. It moves the needle. If we all get upset and we all take action and say, I'm going to hold you accountable to our congressperson, votes, even more than money, will move that needle. So we are powerful. It's still a democracy here. Not perfect, but we can fix this. And yeah, Joe Biden needs to fucking fix this.
Yep. And free Jose too, because I want to say one thing, that Jose is a nonviolent first-time offender that's going to prison for under 5 pounds of cannabis.
How would you like it if it was
24 years old.
Yeah, if you had a 24-year-old that has never been in trouble, sent into maximum security prison, How's that going to help him? How is that helping society?
Yeah, how does that help the world? It's
It
like,
doesn't.
And then once you finally let people out, then you're like, okay, well, you can't vote and you can't do this and you can't get a job and you can't do this. So what are you doing to these people? Like, you're literally sending them deeper and deeper into this area and saying, go get yourself out of it. But by the way, I'm taking everything away from you too, just to
it
make
creates a
like,
whole new problem.
Yeah.
Like, why are you mad?
A cycle.
And don't forget, if in case you're looking at this going, he's breaking the law, he deserves to go to jail. Remember about Bella and me? 5 pounds? Like, I couldn't get Bella to return like one letter of a text for 5 pounds. Okay, 5 pounds is a joke. We'll lose 5 pounds and not even, this is gonna potentially send him to jail for more than 8 years. And it's something that Bella and I don't even waste our time talking about. There's videos of her with hundreds of pounds. So understand, if you're not feeling good about Jose, then you should be sending me to prison because I'm the chairman CEO. Send me, because you can't have it both ways.
Exactly.
By the way, my wife hates when I say that.
Sure she does. We're going to leave it there. We're going to leave it there. We want to thank you all for joining us today. Thank you to Bella, to Weldon, to Kyle, to SupaPeach. It was a riveting conversation and very informative and educational.
And thank you to you,
Thank
Laura.
you.
Thank you, everyone.